Welcome to one and all that are joining us today, or that may view this at a later time. We are Facilitate to Motivate, and we are presenting our first installation of Can You Hear Us Now? This is really a segment where we are giving a platform for Black women professionals to share their thoughts and feelings on how all that is going on in the world right now related to racial injustices and even the global pandemic, how it's affecting their ability to show up as their authentic selves in the workplace. So my name is Dr. Jeanita Pritchett, and I'll be your host and moderator for the day. I'm one of the co-founders of Facilitate to Motivate. Joining on the call are the other co-founders, Kara Robinson, who is in the upper right-hand corner, and Dr. Christina Jones, who is right below me. We also have a fantastic, I'm talking phenomenal set of panelists that have joined us today that will be really providing their insights, their thoughts, and contributing to some potential actionable strategies that you guys can leave here with from today. So joining us, and I'm going to go into their bios in a little bit, we have Dr. Sherma Charlamagne-Badal in the top left corner. We have Dr. Candice Ulmer in the bottom left corner. And in the bottom right, we have Dr. Jamila Bowman Williams in the bottom right corner. And again, I'll give you a little bit of background on who they are before we get started. So really, as I mentioned, the goal of today is to give a platform for Black women to elevate their voices. So often in conversations around these topics, our voices aren't heard. And we decided as the other members of Facilitate to Motivate, we really wanted to shift gears, pivot on what we were focusing on in the moment to be able to provide this space. We felt it was really important to not only be talking amongst ourselves about what we wanted to see change, but also bring that to the forefront, really get that in front of others. And so what really kicked this off, for like many of you all know, a few weeks ago, the world was really shaken to its core. We really, in a matter of a few days, witnessed several traumatic events, from people claiming that they're being threatened in a park, to learning about the murder of Breonna Taylor, to learning or seeing the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, to then finally witnessing the senseless murder of George Floyd. And that, to me, is really what broke the camel's back. But that camel's back has been stressed for quite some time. And so what this has really done is not only shined a light on the many injustices and biases that are inevitable within the in the justice system, but it also cast a light on the number of disparities that exist for the Black community when you look at places like the healthcare system, the education system, housing markets, and the workplace. So today, we really want to hear from our wonderful panelists how this has impacted them and what strategies they would recommend to organizations to move the needle forward. So before we get into the discussion, I want to give some background information about our wonderful, distinguished panelists, okay? So up first, we have Dr. Candice Ulmer. Dr. Candice Ulmer is a native of South Carolina and graduated from the College of Charleston in 2012 with a BS in chemistry and biochemistry. Dr. Ulmer graduated in May 2016 with a Ph.D. in chemistry as a McKnight Doctoral Fellow from the University of Florida in Dr. Richard Yost's research group. Outside of her research, Dr. Ulmer was a member of the Florida Mass Spec Discussion Group and the American Society for Mass Spectrometry Diversity Committee in an effort to increase diversity at conferences and ASMS-supported events. Dr. Candice Ulmer was a NIST NRC postdoctoral research associate from June 2016 through August 2017, and was involved in multi-omic ultra-high performance liquid chromatography, high resolution mass spectrometry, try to say that 3 times fast, method development, lipidomics, interlaboratory studies, environmental exposure monitoring on human marine life. There, she published 10 peer-reviewed articles and designed a software known as Lipid Pioneer that generated exact masses for over 60 lipid classes. Dr. Ulmer is currently a clinical chemist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. Her responsibilities as project lead and acting chief of the Clinical Reference Laboratory for the Cancer, Kidney, and Bone Disease Biomarkers in the Clinical Chemistry branch include the accurate measurement of chronic disease biomarkers and the assessment of clinical analytical methods in patient care. Her talented contributions as an early career mass spectrometrist were recognized in a feature article entitled Faces of Mass Spectrometry in June 2018 issue of the Journal of American Society for Mass Spectrometry, in which her work with parathyroid hormone reference measurement procedure was mentioned. She was also featured in the Mass Spec at the Analytical Clinical Interface, March 2020 article highlight for the analytical scientist. As a result, Dr. Ulmer was nominated by the American Association of Clinical Chemistry to serve on the newly formed International Federation of Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine Committee on Bone Metabolism. She's a co-chair of the American Society of Mass Spectrometry, Clinical Chemistry Interest Group, and Publication Committee, and assumes appointed elected memberships in 6 committees for other scientific organizations that include the International Metabolomics Society, the Metabolomics Quality Assurance and Quality Control Consortium, Metabolomics of North America, and the American Chemical Society. Welcome, Candice, Dr. Candice Ulmer. Up next, we have Dr. Sherma Charlamagne-Badal. Dr. Sherma Charlamagne-Badal holds a Ph.D. in social policy and social research and is currently completing a master's degree in nursing at Johns Hopkins University. She's a former assistant professor of public health and a special advisor on health equity at Loma Linda University in South Carolina and former public health chief for the state of Maryland. She is the owner of Beauty Box Wigs, an online wig store that uses part of its profits to support initiatives in Black communities, and recently, with her husband, Brian Badal, co-founded the Badal Family Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting education for children in their homeland of St. Lucia. Dr. Charlamagne-Badal is passionate about health equity, and most recently, because of her educational experiences, has focused considerable efforts advocating for anti-racist curriculums in nursing education. Like so many other Black women, her experiences with institutional racism across her work and learning settings have both cost and taught her much, and she is delighted to share these experiences today. Welcome, Dr. Charlamagne-Badal. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, closing out this dynamic panel is Dr. Jamila Bowman-Williams. Dr. Jamila Bowman-Williams is an associate professor at Georgetown Law. Dr. Williams received her JD from Stanford Law School and her PhD in sociology from Stanford. Her research focuses on contemporary bias and the law, with an emphasis on the nature of bias, which includes implicit, explicit, and structural, the effectiveness of anti-discrimination law, and the capacity of law to promote compliance and social change. More specifically, she uses social psychology theory and empirical analysis to examine the impact of anti-discrimination law on individuals it is intended to protect. Dr. Williams also explores the various organizational strategies and policies designed to reduce bias, with particular attention to the importance of legal strategies for enhancing equity and inclusion. While her core scholarly interests focus on employment law and anti-discrimination law, her research is also relevant to the broader field of law and society. She has published in the Washington Law Review, Iowa Law Review, and the Georgetown Law Journal. She has also authored several white papers and reports and her work has been featured by a range of media outlets. Before joining the faculty at Georgetown Law, Dr. Williams worked as an associate in the employment law practice of Paul Hastings, LLP in Chicago, where she specialized in conducting privileged diagnostics of employment processes and advising employers on diversity inclusion programs. Dr. Williams was also a National Science Foundation Fellow and a visiting scholar at the American Bar Foundation in Chicago. Welcome, Dr. Jamila Williams. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I mean, again, I can't talk about how just dope these women are. Like, at first, can we just give everybody a round of applause for just everything that they're bringing to the table? So before we get into our discussion, I just wanted to provide a few facts for you all, just to really kind of calibrate people on why and how these disparities really do impact your ability to show up at the workplace. As many people know, back on March 31st, 2020, we celebrated Equal Pay Day, which is the day in which American women must work into the year to earn the same salary that white men did in 2019. So March 31st is the bar for women. However, if we look at that by race, for Black women, our day does not come until August 13th this year. So what that means, we need to work until August 13th of this year to earn what our counterparts earned last year, earning at just 62 cents on the dollar compared to our counterparts. Now, this disparity is really important because Black women also have the highest rates of being the sole breadwinners for their community or their household. And so having these economic disparities can obviously have a grand impact on their ability to have economic stability within their home. In an HBR article that was recently published that talks about how Black women describe navigating race and gender in the workplace, the author noted that the experience of women in color in the workplace often feel that they are being judged for other things beyond just their work, often these intangible items such as their ability to code switch, how they show up physically, and what comes out of their mouth. They're also tied with being the representative of other people of color, and are often told they must dim their light to not intimidate others. And if you don't have anybody in your corner, which often does happen in our community, you tend to get weeded out. In a study conducted by the Women in Workplace, they found that Black women at the executive level are those that feel the least included within their work, representing only 86% of them feeling included in their work, whereas 94 to 95% of their Caucasian counterparts feel included in their work. This tends to have a very high emotional tax on their ability to show up and how it could be a barrier towards their success. They often have suffered from disruptions in sleep patterns, reduction in their sense of psychological safety, and as a result, do not have the ability to fully contribute at work. Despite all this, they still report that they like to remain in the same organization, work towards higher ranking positions, but most importantly, be influential leaders. And I think that is exactly why we are all here, because within our respective positions, we want to be the leaders for change and the catalyst to really move towards action. We want to take this conversation from empathy and are you okay to these are the strategies that we have designed to move forward to level the playing field for everyone. So with that, I know I just said a mouthful. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm done talking. We're going to hear from our panelists now. So the first question to the panelists is, with everything that's going on, from the injustices that are being experienced by Black people to even the impact of COVID-19, how has that impacted your ability to show up at work? And just in general, how are you feeling in the moment?
I'll start. I'll go ahead and jump in. So yeah, I'm just going to keep it real. It's been exhausting, and I know many others are feeling exhausted. We're hearing a lot about this, but just emotionally, it's taxing. And this is before George Floyd. Like you mentioned, all the incidents, Jeanita, they've all sort of piled up, and they aren't new. They aren't anything new that we haven't experienced before. But right now, it's just so salient and it's so present everywhere we look. And if you're on social media, across all the platforms, it's what everyone's talking about. So we've been talking about these things, but there's still a way to find your space a little bit more outside of that. But now you aren't getting that as much, just because, it's just hard to take the step back now. And then my research is on social justice and on racial justice and on bias in the workplace. So that just makes me that much more engaged, or important for me to step up and be engaged now. But yeah, I will say there are kind of costs to that in terms of thinking about how I'm going to use my scholarship to be an activist. Like, there's a sense of pressure, in a way, pressure that I'm putting on myself, and almost a little bit of guilt too. Just maybe I'm not doing enough, and what can I do more to represent my people and free my people? So just all of those things are going on. And then we still have to show up in our meetings. So I haven't been keeping my camera on a lot, and I haven't been showing up to the Zoom happy hours a lot, because it's too much. People are well-intentioned, but that is another layer on everything else going on, and our own concerns and our own families. It's just, I have to draw the line somewhere. So just in terms of protecting my own peace and space too. So.
I can jump in. Oh, go ahead, Candice, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say that right now, I'm in school full time. And when I first started my program a year ago, I talked about, and it's not just specific to this organization, in any organization that I've been, I have not turned a blind eye to what I perceive to be institutional instances of racism. And I've always spoken up. And when I started the program that I'm currently part of, I did the same thing. I spoke up early. And what I've noticed is, since the last set of events have unfolded, is that what I've said has now taken, has been focused more on, right? The school already started to make changes to the curriculum and to several aspects of their functioning. But more recently, I sit on several of the work groups that are making the changes within the school, and I've noticed how now I am being heard a little bit more, actually a lot more. Before I felt I was speaking, but not really being heard all the time, or validated or acknowledged. And I've also noticed a lot of correspondence from the school at different levels in terms of responding to what's going on, reacting to what's going on, putting in various provisions, even as far as celebrating Juneteenth, making it a paid, partially paid holiday, for, day off for employees. Okay, so I'm seeing that, and it's good, but at the same time, it does bring a little resentment, because it is difficult to be part of an organization where you have given yourself the responsibility to speak up. You're speaking up and you want to see positive changes, and then it takes so much happening, so much trauma for there to be movement. And so you appreciate the movement that you're seeing and the progress, but it also brings a sort of exhaustion to it because of all what it took just to be heard. So there are definitely, for me, mixed emotions when it comes to how my organization at this time is responding to the current events.
Yeah, I definitely share you all's sentiments completely. I noticed that as the reports start coming in, initially my response to them were almost in a sense kind of numbing, because you began to just get used to seeing things like that. You get used to surviving in this world of systemic racism. And so when I was consciously being asked by some of my colleagues and others about how it is that I was feeling, I couldn't exactly put it into words because I was in this numb state. And so it forced me to give myself some type of introspection and to really face how it is that I was truly feeling, and to just reiterate what it is that you all said. Yes, I am exhausted. I am scared. I'm nervous. And overall, I'm just not okay. I'm a little surprised that more people haven't asked me that question of how it is that I'm feeling, how it is that I'm navigating through these unprecedented times. But I think that overall, with everything that we're witnessing, it's forced me to become more aware of my Blackness, and unfortunately how it is that it's being viewed as a threat. And so it forces me to also kind of question the motives and the genuineness of others that I've interacted with in the past. And unfortunately, us as Blacks, we can't escape what it is that is happening. It's a part of our everyday life, and we are forced to navigate through it. And so for me personally, I was, kind of tasked along with two of my other close friends to basically transition from a chemist to an activist overnight. And it puts me in this place to become essentially the voice of the Black community, especially Blacks in STEM, to explain the consequences of systemic racism, to explain essentially why it's not okay for things to continue as they currently are.
Yeah, I would add to that what I show up to work in terms of like, are you okay sometimes? And a lot of times, especially as Black women, we have to be the strong one, a strong Black woman, that pressure of having to be super strong when everything hits the fan. You just got to show up with a smile on your face. Everything is okay. And you have to go to work. People have meetings. They don't even recognize that something happened that may affect you. And that really bothers me a lot. The other thing that when you hear those things, part of me thinks, oh boy, what kind of life did they live before this? Because we know this coming. They're going to dig up some sort of, that person was a criminal, so they're not worthy of life. It's as though to be Black, the only acceptable Black is the exceptional Black, super stellar, very educated, well-spoken, oh, you speak so well, as though it is something that is not normal or, to be a Black person. And all of this is just piling on it. It brings you back to work of all those instances that you have, like, am I perfect enough that if something happens to me in such a violent way that they're gonna say my life was worthy enough to someone to protest for? And that was one of the things that I really, that what was triggering for me in this moment of like, what kind of life did he live that they're gonna say he was not worthy to, to be alive?
Yeah.
I want to just go back to the reflection that Candice was mentioning. That part is real too, of just how you kind of take this moment to look back and think about everything that you've experienced and think about how really every day you have to take steps to navigate and maneuver and put on this mask. And it's actually interesting, my brother, he's a psychiatrist, but he was talking to someone, and we had a family Zoom recently, and he was saying that one of his white friends, they were just, social distancing, but walking with the kids. And she was just saying how anxiety invoking it is with COVID, and how you have to be so hyper conscious because it's out there and you don't know where. You have to wash your hands and use Purell and make sure you back up when people come, and just like how it's so like it's such an inconvenience and you have to be so hyper vigilant. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of sounds like it is when you know that you're confronting racism. It's invisible, it's out there, you don't know where or when, but you have to take these steps, and then people tell you it's a hoax, right? Oh, it's just the flu. Oh, it's not, only certain people are vulnerable. Oh, it's not that bad, but that's the reality of it. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because that's almost is a good analogy in terms of what we think, what we are facing each day in terms of figuring out how to navigate these racist structures without falling victim to them, or without, our people falling victim to them as well.
Christina, anything you want to add?
I did want to add one thing, and Candice, I'm picking up on something you said as well that, I do identify with. And I think that is the strength to be able to say, I'm not okay. Mm-hmm. Because we're not okay. At least I can speak for myself that I'm not okay, and I think that takes real strength, that takes real courage. And in fact, in the last few weeks, several of my Black friends holding leadership positions in various organizations have called and told me they're not okay, and really having a very difficult time continuing to ignore the slights that they experience on a continuous basis in these organizations that they're part of and that they serve within. And so I think it's so powerful what you said, that we are not okay. And it's okay to not be okay, because what we're experiencing, we shouldn't be experiencing. And I think it makes it so difficult for us to show up every day in a leadership role, whatever that might be, function at a high enough level to be not just competent, but exceptional, keep our emotions in check, and still be aware of everything that is going on and that is affecting us. I think that is a very difficult balancing act. And we do need each other. We need the support of each other, and we need forums such as this one and others to express the fact that we are going through something that is very challenging, and we need things to change, because there's no way we can survive under this type of pressure for much longer.
And it's not just in our workplace. It is in our workplace where we would think would be a bubble of protection, but people are being killed, and people who are being killed when they're sleeping, and for having what's thought to be a $20 bill. People are being lynched. Like, how do you know people are being lynched? And then they're talking like there may be a race war, and like you're thinking about your family that you have to protect, like the counter movements and all of this, and you're just like, you literally have to worry about your life and your safety. Not only Black men, but Black women too, every time you step out. Then you go into the workplace, okay, you've made it at least there. We got all our degrees. I don't know how many degrees here combined, but it's something ridiculous, right? So we did all of that. Right? We should be able to walk in and take a breath of fresh air, like, okay, we're here. But nah, we face it there too, right? So it's just, it's a lot. And I just want people to just acknowledge that. And I don't know, I don't necessarily want everyone coming to me asking me how I feel every moment, because for me, that's emotional labor too. And that's more work too, on top of what I already need to do. But just maybe just, you know, saying I see you and I'm looking out. I'd rather them speak up and not make me the only one, like Sherma said, to always have to speak up. Like, I'd rather them do that type of thing more right now. But yeah, I just want to add that.
I think
Yeah,
doing
and
temperature check at the beginning of meetings, or anytime you're just engaging with everybody, not just us, but everybody. How are you feeling? Like, before we get to business as usual for the day, how are you feeling? Where's everyone at? Just so we know if this is even a conversation we need to proceed with.
absolutely. And I was just going to add 2 resources to kind of help communicate essentially what it is that we're saying. Were 2 recent pieces provided, one by Shaniqua Golding. She wrote a piece that says maintaining professionalism in the age of Black death is a lot. And so that piece, I think, really exemplifies exactly what it is that we're saying. And then the other one by Danielle Cadet that states your Black colleagues may look like they're okay, chances are they're not. So just 2 written words, you know, that I think really communicate essentially what it is that we're saying. Takeaway pieces.
Nice. Well, thank you all for just, again, checking in and letting me know how you guys are feeling, to be able to move into the next part of our conversation. And so as we're all here, you know, we all are very experienced. We all have worked in a variety of fields. And despite all of our education, I'm sure each and every one of us has experienced some form of injustice or conscious bias at the workplace. So if you could, can you describe a moment where you felt that you were experiencing one of those injustices in the workplace, and how you felt during those moments?
I guess I can start. Before I begin, I do want to state that in each one of those instances, I had to effectively communicate that the color of my skin, my gender, and my age are not a threat. And to make that very clear, there are a few different instances where I've experienced injustices, majority of them being, unfortunately, racial injustice, having to be called out of my name, being told that essentially the reason why I exist in that particular platform is because of the color of my skin and an attempt to meet a quota, as well as, you know, comments being made essentially about my age and being a early career scientist. And so in those moments, you feel a sense of needing to justify your existence, to justify essentially why it is that you're there and why you were chosen. And so having to always prove your worth is exhausting. And it also plays on, you know, imposter syndrome, which I think many of us experience on a daily basis. So having to always show essentially that I'm intelligent, that I deserve to be there, is essentially a lot. And it just forces you to have that introspection to remind yourself of your worth, and why you're there.
You want to go, Sherma? Okay,
Sure. I mean, I can always go because I have had so many interesting experiences, and not in a good way. I am an immigrant, as you can probably hear from my accent. I am from the Caribbean island of St. Lucia. When I came to this country, of course, I was treated like every other African American, right? I look like an African American. And so I experienced some of the slights and what we call microaggressions, and sometimes open, racism, but it didn't affect me the way it probably affected an African American. But as acculturation set in, as the years went on, it started to weigh on me. I started to feel very much affected by what I was experiencing. And so I remember one experience in particular of when I was an assistant professor. And I remember wanting to submit a grant application. and being immediately turned down because I had to have authorization from the director of my center in order to do that. I was flat out turned down. I wasn't mentored. I wasn't asked questions about why I wanted to do it. Did I have the experience to do it? Was there any way we could bridge the gap between what you've done and what you want to do? I was flat out turned down. And I remember myself and another colleague, we wrote that grant together. I actually had to argue my point. And I think when he realized I wasn't going to leave the room until I got a yes, then that's where the conversation took another turn. But I got a yes. I submitted, myself and my colleagues submitted for this grant. We were funded nearly $2 million. Okay, within my first year of being an assistant professor, my salary, half of my salary was paid, half of his salary was paid. That grant was just spreading money throughout the school. And I remember when I eventually left that school, that there was a faculty meeting within which my name was mentioned. And this is what was said. We didn't think that she deserved to be here. We didn't think that she deserved the title that she had. And it's not until she got that grant did we think she was worthy. And whereas nobody said that while I was there, guess what? I felt that while I was there. The way I was treated, the way I was excluded, the comments that were made, the resistance that I got in just doing what any researcher, what any professor would have done. I have had ideas that I have brought to the table openly hijacked, gotten turned down in an email about an idea, and then it gets presented literally verbatim the next day in a meeting. So yes, I have experienced all of these things, and I have fought through all of these things, but there comes a time when you have to ask yourself, and I admire people who experience these things and continue to be part of the organizations within the experience within which they experience them, because they are essentially paving the way and keeping the door ajar for other people like us who need to be part of that organization. Some of us don't last that long. Some of us don't have the resources and the support to actually remain in a place where we feel unwanted. And so Jeanita read in my bio, it's taught me a lot. My experiences have taught me a lot, but they've also cost me a lot. And so I think that any one of these experiences, and I continue to have these experiences over and over, I'm learning to rest and not to give up. I'm learning to rest and not to give up, to rest, recover, and go again, because it's a marathon. Okay, it's not a sprint, and it takes quite a bit of effort to keep going. But we have to commit to going, to keep fighting, because of the bigger picture, not just being us, but everybody else like us who deserves to be at the table.
Yeah, so many great points made by both of you. So just following up on the point about the presumptions and the assumptions that are there everywhere you go about why you're there, what you know, are you good enough? It's like it does make you work twice as hard, and your credentials have to be that much better, and you have to have that much more recognition, or else they're going to downplay it or have questions about you. Do you really know what you're talking about? And so it's tough balancing that every day. There's for women in academia, there's a book called Presumed Incompetent. Like, that's the reality, that every room you go in, you're presumed, and you have to prove your competence every time you walk into the classroom, right? Every time you walk into a faculty meeting, every time you go sit on a panel to talk. So, and then it's not just something that everyone has to deal with, because, okay, everyone has to do work and show they're good and all of that. But we know that if we make a mistake, it's associated with our Blackness, right? Oh, see, I knew she wasn't that good, right? Or it's associated with a stereotype. They're there, like Candice mentioned, they're there for, diversity reasons or something. So it's just hard to know that that's always in the backdrop of everywhere, everywhere you go. And then, as Sherma mentioned, then if you leave because you don't like that environment, or you aren't feeling like you can thrive in that environment, then what happens then? Oh, see, she didn't make it. Yeah, she got that grant, or yeah, she wrote that paper, but she didn't have what it takes. So like we feel that everywhere, and it's just hard dealing those racial biases and stereotypes. It's just compounded on top of the general professional experience that everyone has in the workplace. And just in addition to that, there are also just the, I reflected on it some when Jeanita invited me to this, but just the ways we have to navigate the structural bias, right? We know we're going into this elite space and these spaces with institutional racism. So we have to shape and mold ourselves to where we're accepted. And I look back and I said, man, so much that I've done in my career is really me playing chess, trying to please people so that I can get accepted in those spaces, right? So when it, like going all the way back to how my research was formed, you know, like, okay, you know, in legal academia, they don't hire activists, right? This was said at my school at Stanford, I'll put it out there. They have a horrible history of hiring Black women and promoting Black women. So they say they don't hire activists, they hire scholars, right? So this is their excuse for not hiring and promoting and tenuring Black women, as if you can't do both, right? So then knowing that schools are like that, when I'm going on the job market, I have to tone it down. I can't talk about racism. Instead, I frame it. Okay, I'm gonna talk about inclusion. You know, how are we gonna be inclusive rather than pointing out, no, this is racist, okay? And then I have to try to be objective as possible as this, I don't care, I'm not passionate about these topics because it affects me and my people. I have to like, act like, no, this is, you know, like I'm a white man studying it from afar where I'm not immersed in it, like that's more valued and legitimate. So I have to pretend that I'm not. And then what journals, don't publish in this journal about race and ethnicity. That's not, you can't, you know, that's not a good journal. You have to go to the mainstream journals. And don't study Black people because that's going to be marginalized. Study white people and white people's attitudes and how they, you know, whether they're, what their biases and reactions are. So anyway, that's just too much information, too much detail, but that just gives an idea of like how we can set up our whole careers. And now I'm kind of over it. So I'm really glad that this has come because I'm like, no, I'm an activist. No, I'm a change agent. No, I study anti-racism and white supremacy and why we need to go beyond these shallow symbolic measures and symbolic strategies to deal with it. And we need to go deeper and really address it for what it is. So it's sort of helping me come into my own as well.
Nice. Showing up as more of your authentic self.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add like one thing that you mentioned, and it's just how we as Black sometimes are just not allowed to be raw and vulnerable about the things that bother us, especially in the workplace. And in that same sense, it also speaks to the strength of our race to be able to not only succeed, be professional, but also to navigate through this. You know, you're beat up essentially at work through microaggressions and systemic racism. You come out of work and you are slapped with the reality of, you know, racial injustice, a second whammy. And it speaks to how we not only rely on, you know, platforms such as religion, but we rely on each other to be that sense of support to get through things like this.
Yeah, I like how Sherma mentioned the whole, you have to rest in order to keep going, because for so long I've struggled with just pushing through and I'm not okay. And this has been the moment where I'm just like, no, like I have to stop. It's okay if I don't respond to that person's email. If you don't understand what's happening with me right now, that's on you. You know, it's not on me to still show up the way that I've been showing up. And I know that I need to rest, channel how I'm feeling, you know, how am I going to be a change agent within the pandemic, and then, you know, keep going from there.
Beautifully stated by everybody, by all. So let's shift the narrative. Let's shift the direction of this conversation. So we know how we feel, we know what we've experienced. Now we want to move towards action. What are some things that you would love to see shift or change within the workplace, help level the playing field? Everyone that's there.
I'll start on this because this is sort of in my area of expertise because I study workplace equity. And I've worked on this as a lawyer before coming into academia. And what I see a lot is lack of accountability in terms of culture. So even if these companies acknowledge that, okay, we'll do some hiring or we'll do some recruiting, we'll go, set up at the HBCU, or we'll put some money towards outreach here to this publication, but they really don't look internally enough to really fix the culture in a way to if they are successful at hiring someone and if people do get their foot in the door, it has to be somewhere where they feel that they can thrive and they're being nurtured and developed, right? Like everyone else. And they're getting not only mentorship, but sponsorship so that they can make it through and not feeling all these tensions that we're talking about of how it's like so difficult just to operate there. And some places are worse than others, but just generally, I think all of these organizations need to really do a deep reflection and really hold up that mirror and see like what these problems are structurally and culturally, instead of just sort of doing these kind of basic diversity, which I'm not saying they aren't important, but like really we see a lot of basic programming and policies that aren't going to change if you don't really change this culture. And it's not an easy thing to do, but we have to start working toward it.
I like to call that going after the low-hanging fruit. A lot of times when things like this happen, organizations tend to look for that low-hanging fruit. What's something that we can check a box and say we've addressed the diversity and not really create a change? So yeah, absolutely, there needs to be that structural change that is changing.
Yeah,
I
I
want
think
to jump in on this because something I've noticed recently, and it's that there are several organizations, if not almost all of them, especially large institutions, who have diversity and inclusion personnel. They do have dedicated offices and employees within that office who are responsible for helping the organization to identify some of the structural challenges and hurdles, and to strategize how and implement solutions to these problems. Okay. When I go into an organization and you have a structure such as an equity and inclusion office in place with very talented and educated people, and I walk into the organization, I start to interact and exist within that organization, function in that organization, and experience that structural racism, I begin to ask the question, how come you have this structure in place? You seem to have a structure in place, but there's so much wrong here. And it's not, you don't have to look very far to find it. It's right at the surface. That's what I have been very confused about. And I noticed something recently. I put myself in a substantial amount of jeopardy to call out very respectfully. And this is how I didn't go in as an opinion. I didn't speak from just a personal perspective. I, pulled in the literature because that's my training, to pull in the literature. I pulled in the literature. I consulted with a world-renowned, researcher on racism within this country, and it's linked to health, for example. I consulted with him. We spoke for hours. He helped me direct me to, some of the key articles that I need to look at. I prepared a paper. I presented it to the powers that be. And within that meeting, the response from one of our own, and I think this is so important, the response from one of our own professors, a Black professor, was that I don't see a problem. I think this is taken care of and there is nothing to do. His words exactly. Now, what do I say to that? I was quiet because one, it's not my meeting. And two, I don't want to get into, an exchange that could turn out wrong, right? So I'm trying to think. And then the chair of the meeting, who holds a very high position, stepped in and said, because it was a discussion after I presented, this was during the question and answer period, stepped in and said, respectfully, you are wrong. And this person is not of our race. It's actually a white woman. She stepped in and said, you are wrong. There is a problem. And I didn't see it until Sherma pointed it out. And once she did, and I went to look for it in the place I thought it was, I couldn't stop seeing it. And I cannot believe how pervasive it is. That's what validated the work that I had done and presented on. And it's easy to get frustrated with a person such as him, because you ask yourself, how could you be Black? How could you be in this organization? How could you miss this? And if I point it out, how could you then disagree with me publicly? But here's my point, that is valuable information. And the reason why that's valuable is because when you become part of the organization, when you benefit from the organization, when your livelihood depends on that organization, when you are in relationships where there are substantial power differentials, and when you're in an environment where you don't feel safe, this is what happens. You become part of the problem. And our health equity offices and inclusion offices become ineffective and crippled because they become part of the problem. And how do they become part of the problem? The problem becomes less visible the longer you are part of it, the longer you are interacting and being part and participating in the system. And organizations have to be humble enough. I know they talk about cultural humility, but I need some real humility. Organizations have to be, and by organizations, I mean specific leaders, because it's human beings who make up an organization. It's not a thing, it's people. Leaders need to be humble enough to realize that they need outside objective help, and that they cannot always depend on that internal structure, because once again, those power differentials and all of these other factors do limit. And one other thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet. After that meeting, after I said what I needed to say, a staff member found me weeks later and said, "Thank you for saying what you said. It needed to be said. I saw it. I didn't have the courage to say it because it is not a safe place." And that to me tells everything about the organization. It wasn't safe enough for somebody experiencing that institutional racism who works there to be able to speak up about it.
I want to jump in really quick. I know we had to turn to Candice, but I'm writing an op-ed on this right now. So I have to give a couple of, just a couple of points on what you said. Well, one, it sounds a little bit like Terry Crews and Gabrielle Union in terms of how he didn't validate her and said she wasn't experiencing what she was experiencing. But going back to these diversity structures. So a lot of the research out there shows that it just isn't effective, right? So some of it is just symbolic, check the box, like Jeanita said, and maybe it really isn't intended to be effective. Some, even with good intentions, they just don't they don't make sure that it's backed by research, and they don't do enough evaluation and assessment. And there's an article out there, it's called Presumed Fair, and it talks about how these structures create this illusion of fairness. So, but when you have that type of diversity office and you have these programs and say, oh, they've checked, they've checked all these boxes, they're taking care of this, I don't see the problem. So if you don't really make sure that the practices are effective and leading to the types of changes that we know we need, then it can actually backfire and exacerbate the inequalities, because people aren't checking their own biases because they're thinking, oh, the organization has it under control by having that diversity and inclusion office. So they're pushing off the responsibility because of that. So sorry, Candice.
Yeah, I was actually just getting ready to say the exact same thing. Is how do we evaluate the effectiveness of these offices and these programs and so forth and so on? Where is the data to show that, being inclusive and having this particular office or this initiative, so forth and so on, is or is not working? I think that's missing. To show the justification for that office or show the justification for those given programs. It's if you're feeding so much money into these initiatives and into these programs, why aren't you following up on them to see how effective they were and to see if we need to reevaluate where it is that we're sending money, so forth and so on. But to also answer your original question, Jeanita, about where we see that shift and how we can see it shifting to be more equitable, I think for us as Blacks, we need to have a little bit more discussion about what our current salaries are, how we're getting bonuses, how we're getting awards, what is your process for obtaining them, how quickly did it happen, so forth and so on, because you need a measure at which to kind of assess your own self and your own progress. I would personally like to see a little bit more of an equal divide in our work, our project, and our opportunities that we're presented within the workplace, as well as to have more representation in some of those high profile and leadership positions within the workplace.
Thank you so much. I love it all. I love it all. We're getting close to the end of our discussion, but I do want to I want to end on a question that has been coming up a lot. We know that this everything that's going on is impacting everybody beyond the Black community. And there are a lot of people that are struggling with, how do I show that I'm an ally? How do I show that I support you? How do I show, or how do I even initiate that conversation? So if you could give one piece of advice to an ally that's struggling to initiate that conversation or show that they support you, what would that be?
I'll start. The check-in, the general check-ins are good, but I don't want to try to have a deep conversation with each one about race and systemic racism. And I feel like that's, again, just more work. So I want them to do some of that work on their own. So they can check on us, go do the work on your own. And then once you do start doing the work on your own, you're going to become more enlightened, but then don't co-opt the conversation, because I've seen that happening too. So then where it's like, oh, I went and read this book and now I had this conversation with my child and I just felt this certain way, and like, it's good, I'm happy those things are happening, but then it's like, oh, you feel guilty and sad about not doing this earlier, and now we're all focused on that and not at what these core issues should be. So I mean, and this very well intentioned, that's why I put this in this bucket of allies and people who really do wanna help. Those are just a couple of things. So do the work, do some work at home on your own. And then also check your biases and the biases of others, so that we don't carry the full burden as Sherma has to do that and show up fighting that battle and being the only one fighting those battles every day.
I agree with that 100%. And also to tack on that, I would say to just be mindful that at the end of the day, I am still an individual and that my needs are different from my other Black counterpart. And so asking me essentially what it is that I need is important. There was a great podcast that actually Christina, she shared with me from the Daily Shine, ask for empathy versus strategy. You know, so essentially when you go and ask me essentially what I need, be very conscious that it may not be what someone else wants. Maybe someone else wanted empathy. Maybe it is that I want a solution or strategy. So just being conscious of that and mindful of everyone's individuality as we navigate through this.
Yeah, thank you, Candice. I totally agree, and Jamila as well. Here's what I'm gonna say. How our allies, answering your question, how you show up, how our allies show up to work, to school, to play, wherever they show up, is a reflection of their heart. And it tells a lot about those conversations that they have in private, those beliefs that they hold dearly. This is what we're experiencing in the workplace and in life and in society. When you go into the park and you're just living your life as a Black person and the cops get called on you, it didn't just start there. That person may be skilled in knowing what to do and how to do it within their workplace or within their community, so as never to call attention to themselves until they do that big thing. But the truth is that there are a lot of people, our doctors, our nurses, our lawyers, our teachers, who show up to the workplace and play by the rules in the workplace, try to play by the rules in the workplace. But what pops out all the time is their heart. It's these same narratives that are perpetuated at their dinner tables. So I would say to my ally, when you're not here and you're not with me, when you're not in my presence, it's what you say and think about me that matters the most. So that's what I would say. The other thing I would say is our allies, and I'll talk mostly about white people, Caucasians, because they have the power, a lot of the power in this society. And that's not in a negative way, that's just in a factual way, okay? They have the majority of the power. And I could say something as a Black person, and I could be labeled as combative and cantankerous, antagonistic, all that kind, and mad, right? And they would come after me and repeat the same thing and everybody would applaud. And if you've noticed, as a Black person, you will jump up and down trying to draw attention to the fact that you're drowning. And then it's not until a white person comes and validates that everybody now believes you. So for example, for years we were saying we are still experiencing racism and this is not a post-racial society. Did anybody believe us? They didn't believe us until a white man in power started to be overt with the racism. And everybody who agreed with him came out of the woodworks and were more overt. And now everybody agrees that, you know what, that racism you've been talking about, it actually really does exist. So the truth is that we have these experiences and it is validated by those people with the power once again. And then so now we have to partner with them in order for us to be truly free. Now that's you know, that creates a bind for a lot of us. That is a significant challenge, but that's something we're willing to do in pursuit of our freedom. So if you're really with us, this is what I want to say. Do for us what you do for yourself. When you have an issue and you create a law to deal with it, do that for us. When you start a new policy because your child had an experience that you never want anybody else to ever have again, do that for us. Love us like you love yourself. Do for us like you do for yourself. Very simple. And then you're really our ally and you're doing everything that you can do to help us. That's what I would say to our allies. And all, of course, in love. I get really passionate, but people who know me love me. Because I am gonna show up as who I am from day one. And I'm gonna be that. And I'm willing to bear the benefits and the burdens with that. And so I have people who I love and trust, who love and trust me. They don't look like me and that's okay. I love everybody. I love people. But if you're gonna show up, watch these conversations when I'm not there. Be loving in your heart genuinely and fight for me like you would fight for yourself.
Thank you for taking us to church.
I just want to add on work within your inner circles, right? Like you may be very well intentioned letting me know that you've had some reflection and you're going to do better. I don't need to know because I knew what your heart was before this moment right here started. But what you need to do is work within your inner circles. Because those are the people who you have the power to change their minds and make them understand how racism messes over us as Black people.
Yeah, what I definitely like to add, especially in terms of allyship, like Sherma says, I personally believe you are who you are wherever you are. You don't suddenly turn up to say a racist comment. It's somewhere in your psyche that it just comes up because, you know, as psychology always says, what's in the subconscious eventually just pops up because it's seated deep down in there. But believe us when we say something is racist. Believe us the first time. It shouldn't have to wait until a knee's on our neck, gasping for breath, for you to believe that we can't breathe. Just listen. If someone comes and says, here's a situation I'm experiencing systemic racism, don't say, but what about this? And please stop with the what about Black on Black crime? Stop it. Just stop it. Listen to the conversation that we're talking about right now. Because when Trayvon Martin died and the founder of the Black Lives Matters movement started back in 2015, I think it was, and she's saying Black Lives Matters. I'm like, nah, I don't know. Really? Does it? And the fact that you're questioning, the fact for me to tell you that my life is important, and you're questioning, are you sure it matters? And then when you come in response and says, well, let's look at everybody else and to compare, it hurts. And sometimes it comes from our friends who are saying, well, I think everybody should have equal, but I'm telling you right now, I'm the one not breathing. I can't breathe right now. And I'm telling you, please just get it. Just let me breathe, please. And that's what I'm saying as an ally. Show up, listen, and believe us when we tell you the first time that we can't breathe.
Thank you so much. The passion is real, and it's wonderful. It's a beautiful moment just seeing everybody feel empowered enough to share these stories, provide these recommendations, and really charge their organizations with some action. We want to see action. So before we do close, I did want to close off by playing Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. And I think that her words so eloquently encapture the many things that women go through but yet Black women go through, but yet still they rise, still they show up, still they come and thrive despite every obstacle being thrown at them. So I'm going to turn to that real quick before we close out, and then we're going to allow the panelists to share their login or excuse me, their contact information, and we will.
It writes me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, there I go.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that just, to me, encapsulates every single thing that we covered. So we are a bit over time, but I do want to just give everybody an opportunity to share. Sorry, gotta stop. YouTube, 1 second.
Oh.
My bad. But I do want to give the panelists a moment to be able to give their contact information. Before we close out, I do want to thank every single one of you all that are tuning in on the live stream. This is the first time we are doing an event like this. We would love to hear your feedback about if you want to see more. We got a ton of people that want to share their thoughts, their opinions on a number of topics. And so we would love to continue to provide this platform for people to share their voice and share their experiences. But thank you so much to Dr. Candice Ulmer, Dr. Sherma Charlamagne-Badal, and Dr. Jamila Bowman-Williams for joining us. And I'd love to just allow you all a second. I know I planned on showing your contact information, but if you all could just real quick unmute your mics and let them know, let the audience know the best way to reach you if they want to learn more or discuss other items or issues with you, please unmute and let them know how to contact you.
Okay, you can find me, I have a website. It's www.jamilawilliams.com. So I have all my research and things I'm up to, upcoming events on there. I also joined Twitter this week. So that's part of me and my mission out here to really be a part of this conversation and change. So that is Prof. Jamila BW is my Twitter handle. So those are the two best places. And I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me, my Georgetown email address and all that too if you search my name on Google.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so let's see, Twitter, my Twitter handle is at Dr. Candice_U. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. And I'm Googleable, so feel free to Google me.
You can find me on Facebook, Sherma Charlamagne-Badal. You can also email me at shermaforblackhealth@gmail.com. I also on my wig website, actually, I'll give you my Instagram handle, Beauty Box Wigs, BeautiBoxx. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, same name, Sherma Charlamagne-Badal. Feel free to email me, reach out, DM me, any of the above. I'm happy to respond. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. Christina, let them know how to reach you.
Ooh, I am on Twitter. It is, I want to say CM Jones, Ph.D. I'm on LinkedIn. If you Google me, like Candice said, I'm Googleable. You'll find probably all my government information. But Twitter's the best place right now.
And Kara?
Well, you can find me on Twitter as well. Is at AK Bellarosa. That's my Twitter handle. Instagram is at KBellSXM. I'm also on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I think you can search for Kara Robinson. If not, search for Kara Arnold. So one of the two names, if you because if you work somewhere, Google, you would probably find me as well.
And myself, I'm also on LinkedIn, so Jeanita Pritchett. I also have a website, janitapritchett.com, and email is janita.pritchett@gmail.com. And for Facilitate to Motivate, if you're interested in connecting with us, please visit our website at facilitate2motivate.com, or you can also email us at info@facilitatetomotivate.com. Again, I want to give just one more round of applause for the phenomenal, dynamic, superb, dope panelists that we have today for sharing your thoughts. So yes, one more clap it up for them one more time. And also just thank you, the audience, for joining us during your lunch hour. We hope that you feel inspired, you feel encouraged to be the catalyst that's needed at your organization to really ignite some change. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to hosting more events in the future. Have a great day and talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys.